We got the Missouri River thing too, man, we do a float trip, that's a lot of fun too. I mean, it's a great float trip, there's 7 bars up there. We could even pack a lunch for you, meet you out on the river with a lunch. I think I'm gonna do a big pontoon boat, I'm gonna buy a 30-foot
Yes.
pontoon boat with a bathroom on it, and take people out for tours. I know, but for people who aren't from around here, we really like that, you know? Yeah, no, that's good, yeah, that's good, I just, yeah, that's good. I just needed some numbers.
Okay, let me call this work session to order. We have discussion of the 2021 recommended St. Charles County budget on the agenda here for the work session. And then, of course, any other miscellaneous topics. So we will start with, Joe, do you have your,
I do, I have a
okay.
packet I put for
Okay.
everybody together. You want to pass these down, Dave? 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, and then give some to the administration, whoever. Okay, so what I wanted to go over is we all, well, not we all know for certain, but me and Joe have a feeling that the captains are underpaid, and so we wanted to have that conversation. So what I wanted to go through the numbers that were given to us and the numbers that are in the community, okay? The first page has got out this off STL today, the salary data, and these have names of people, but none of people in our, this is just the, and you're not supposed to use names, but this is how I took it off the website. And so if you see the actual pay, Now, when we were presented with it, there's a pay range, and so I'll talk about that as well. But these are the actual salaries of all these communities, and then there's the average at the bottom of each department. That's the average of the captains. So the average is $103,560 for the captains. That's the actual salaries. If you go to the second page, these numbers here are the actual. These are the police captains. These are ranges, not the actual salaries. These are all the police captains in the area. So those show all the averages, but those aren't the actual salaries, okay? So then you go to the police captains here in St. Charles County, and that 106 to 99 is the range and the average. It's not the actual salaries, okay? So then you go to, this is what the Director of Human Resources provided to me, this last page. And those are the actual salaries of the captains, 87, 98, 96, and 95. So the average is 94,000. And then if you go to 2021, they're using that number as 98,178. But so if you say, well, yeah, but they're getting a raise for 2021. Yeah, that's true, but everybody's getting a raise for 2021. That's the 3% or whatever, 2 and 2 or whatever you're calling that. And so also take note that the Assistant Director of Administration, those two folks are getting, I guess that's 2 or 3. Is that right, Joan? Is it 3 of them or 2 of them that's getting a raise on that?
There's only 2.
There's 2, okay, so that.
And it's, I'm sorry, Councilman, but the raise is the 3%, the grid movement's 1%. This is a reclass.
That's what I'm saying, reclassification, right. So the reclassification puts them up from 132 to 144, okay? So the one assistant director did get an 8% increase for acting director role for workforce development, okay? So keep that in mind, okay? And then here again, this is provided by the county, so that's just verifying that those are the actual salaries. Those are the actual salaries. So the average used was 1.4, but those are the salaries right there. So not one captain is even at the high end of the salary range, okay? And if there's something wrong on here, Joanne, let me know, because I just put this together between Human Resources and Brent gave me the information. So if you look at this chart here, I put this last page, or this page, it's got captains and LTs. Okay, so the captains is, those numbers are the captains right there, 98,013, and go all the way down the line. I use A, B, C, and D, okay? Those salary grades are at 303. If we were to give them a grade up, then their numbers would be the following: 107, 106, 105, and 95. But that's not proposed right now, just the salaries that are in that category there. If you go to the LTs, lieutenants right now, these are what they're making now, but they're getting a recommended, grade increase of 302. So if you look at those salaries, all those numbers, they're basically making more, and that does not include the overtime, they're making more than the captains. So if you take the captains and upgrade them one grade, then those will be the numbers that they would make. They would be making, what's happening is lieutenants do increase, they do deserve an increase. And no one's disputing that. No, I'm not even disputing that the assistant directors don't deserve an increase. But the captains, if you look at the numbers, the captains deserve an increase too, and this has been ignored for several years. And so if they want up another grade, then that would be their number. So look at that number compared to what the lieutenants will make when they get their recommended grade increase. So to me, it makes absolute sense. So they would not, but if we don't do nothing, then the lieutenants will be making more than the captains. And then if you go to the positions requiring adjustment, John, please correct me, but these are these the ones that need adjustments, or are these the ones that are getting adjustments?
We don't mess with the list that they come up with. So when HR studies and the position is 10% or more out of alignment with the market, they make a recommendation that those people should be moved. That's happened ever since the Evergreen study in one form or another. Samantha is much better at it than her predecessors were. But we forward those to you for reclassification.
Okay, so my question is all this list of these 15 or how many people is, are they getting
There's 18 positions up for reclassification.
so they are getting reclassified?
Yes, now it's not 18 people. I'm sorry,
They're
John.
all in the PAP bill before you tonight for approval.
Okay, so if you guys are using these numbers 80 and 86%, but the numbers you used for the captains was the pay range, not their actual salaries. And so that's what I don't understand.
That's what this is too.
Huh?
It's the same for everybody.
Well then, okay, but so if they're all at the bottom, if they're at the bottom of the range, from what the captains have asked for in years past is just to get one more, to separate the compression, to get them away from the lieutenants. How does it make sense to pay lieutenants more than captains?
We have all kinds of people who are in a lower classification who make more than people in the classification above them. That can happen because the ranges overlap. So there's people all through this government who make less than somebody who's a range above them. Or
Okay.
a range below them, pardon me.
Well, I mean, this is the one that was brought to my attention, and if the lieutenants are getting a grade increase, I'm just gonna make a motion, not tonight, but if we get all the numbers and everything, and if the council decides it's a good thing to do, then we'll do it. If they don't, they don't. But I think that the captains, you know, they're like I said at the last meeting, you got directors. Steve Elman's is the boss, and then you got the assistant directors. Chief Ritz is the boss, you got assistant directors. They're the only assistant directors that make under $100,000 in this county. And how does that make any sense? It just makes no sense. And how can you pay lieutenants more than captains? I mean, this one is right in front of your face. It flies in front of your face. So, I mean, all the other ones, no one brought anything else to my attention. So that's why I'm bringing this up. This is something that we can fix, especially with all the stuff the cops put up with this year, with COVID and all the craziness and riots and all the nut stuff, and they got a high-risk job. So that's what I'm gonna put in front of you guys. So anybody got any questions specifically on what I provided?
Yeah, Joe, the only problem I see is you're gonna have captains making more than the county council. You know, that went to school for 7 years and had several years of experience before they even came to work here.
How much of the, I don't, yeah, see, I don't know that, but, if they haven't been here very long, but these guys have been here 30 years. Some of them.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Yes.
Jennifer, would you? Yes.
Well, I
I'm
want to
sorry.
make one comment as it relates to the job of, say, a department who has an assistant director, like public health would be one. We have other departments that are structured with a department director and division directors. And then we have the police department. Police department with a chief and bureau commanders. Bureau commanders are not the same as an assistant director. When you're an assistant director within your department, you're responsible for all aspects of your department's operation, your department's budget, your department's personnel issues, and your department's day-to-day functions of the things that you execute. Within the police department, that's not the same. All of those administrative functions, that budget management, those personnel issues, are all removed from those divisions and placed within one bureau, the Bureau of Administrative Services. Those captains do not have that same scope of work as an assistant director within those other departments. They do high-level work, not disputing any of that, but it is not equivalent to an assistant director in the other county departments.
Okay, Mr. Crowe.
And, pardon me, counsel, but could you also speak to the issue of whether or not any assistant directors make under 100,000?
We do. We have currently assistant directors and some department directors. Well, actually, there will be coming forward one department director making under 100,000 today. A reclassification of the police captains would put them above 3 department directors, several assistant directors, and above other division directors who have a high level of education requirement in order to have the job in the first place.
Mr. Chairman. Okay, go ahead.
Mr. Crowe first, then I'll get you.
I took a whole different approach to this, okay? I took the data that Samantha was able to give us the last meeting, and this sheet that Joanne gave us. And I talked to John Greifshoe twice about this, and I sent an email out today to John, Samantha, the chief, and Steve as well. And the problem, I think, is this, in a nutshell, is the county system, pay doesn't get looked at until that employee's 90% of the average. So they're already 10% in the hole before the county looks at it, okay? And then when the county does look at it, okay, then they are forced into giving those raises within the pay system, which often results in us giving them more than they really need. Example, with the study that they gave, our rank and file police officers, which is 90 officers, we're paying them 106% of the average, okay? That extra 6% boils out to $370,000. So if we paid them 100% of the average, which is too late, you can't go back and get it from them, but we'd be $370,000 savings to the county. The reason we didn't probably do that is because with this pay grade system, you don't have that option. You can't fine tune your pay. As far as the captains go, when Mr. Brazel brought up captains, and I read this, the captains aren't as bad shape as the sergeants. The sergeants are really the ones, they're at 91% right now. So the sergeants, be frank with you, are just 1% off of triggering a pay rate increase anyway. But the problem is with the existing system is you're 10% in the hole before you do anything. And then when you do something, you gotta conform to this pay grid system, which doesn't allow you fine tune, the system. If you actually look at it, and I just took the numbers, I used the average pay scale that was on here. Example would be on the sergeants, for instance, on the captains. If you took the average scale, okay, there's $6,700 below the local pay. It would take $26,000 to fix it. Now, if you take the fact that we're already giving them a 4% increase, okay, that drops it to $10,944. So you could pay the captains the same as every other, average pay of every other captain in this county for 10 grand. If you do the same thing, exact thing with sergeants, the sergeants were at 91%. There's more of them. There's 17 sergeants. If you do that with sergeants, it would cost 69 grand to bring them up to local average. Now, but here's the problem, because you're already paying the rank and file 106%, you ain't got the money to balance it out. But if we actually just could figure out a way to HR work so that those folks all get paid the average, and we make that pay grade system where you don't have to pay over average, or necessarily under average, you can set it closer to the average, the county could save hundreds of thousands of dollars, and every one of our police officers would be getting paid equivalent to the local average. That's the numbers I looked at. Now, John, I gave it all to John today. and Samantha can look at it, and maybe they can come up with a better program. And
Mr.
whatever we do here, we gotta be cognizant of the fact that we're probably gonna have to think about doing that countywide eventually.
Joanne, Mr. Hammond's next.
Mr. Cronin, I just want to point out that, while fundamentally, the whole last part of what you said, I don't disagree with, that these are averages of midpoint. So these aren't actually what people are making. They're making money within their grade based on how long they've been with us, on whether or not they have educational attainment in that department, what level of educational attainment they have. So they could have just an AA degree or the equivalent, a bachelor's, a master's. I don't think we've had anybody go above master's. But what that average is telling you is how we compare with the pay rates of other departments. So our actual police officers are not making 106% of what every other average police pay in those groups are. The pay range is at that.
I took the middle pay range, and I just used the data that I had. Okay, I didn't go out and get additional data.
So
on
you
it.
looked at their actual.
I looked at the center
pay.
range, which is what I think you guys did when you came up and said, you're at 94%. You looked at the center range.
Right, we were looking
okay?
at that. You just used the word actual, that was their actual pay
Yeah.
average, whereas that's the average of the range.
Well, I get that. but
Comparing the one range
That's
to
the
the
best
other.
data I got right now.
Right,
So-
so when you slip out of a range by more than 10%, we move your whole range. So not only do you get whatever other grid movement or raise is up that year, you get a change in grade.
And like
And
on,
that obviously increases.
and like on the police officers, if you look at the center range, this is all the stuff that you all gave me. I just
Right,
crunched the
right.
numbers. The center, we're paying over average by $4,000 a police officer. 90 police officers, $370,000. So I think that's the problem is we wait too long before you adjust the pay. And then when you adjust the pay, you're stuck into these arbitrary ranges instead of being able to adjust the pay wherever you want. Because am I correct in those ranges are about $5,000 a person, a range? When you go from one range to the next range?
Depends on the range.
From 3 on the low side to 6 or 7 on the high side?
It's about 15% on the high side, 15% on the low side.
Okay. But regardless, I hear what Mr. Brazel is saying, but if you look at the numbers, it appears to be that the sergeants are getting a rawer deal than the captains are, so.
The sergeants are farther out of sync. Their normal year to be studied, the police normal year to be studied is next year. And unless something pretty extraordinary happens to police pay in the region, they're probably gonna slip out next year and have to be adjusted at that point.
Mr.
They were
Hammond.
specially studied this year.
Yeah, I think when we went through this pay study, and I think everybody was here except one person that we talked about where we wanted to pay, and it wasn't, we didn't want to be the highest, and we didn't want to be in the middle, we wanted to be in the 90% range, and that's what we all agreed on several years ago. There's a lot of employees that are, you know, like 90 and 91, that they won't be getting an increase, you know, or an adjustment, and with their raises may put them up a little higher this year, but I thought we all agreed on that. We were gonna look at people that fell below 90%.
Here's my point. Joanne, tell me here's what I'm trying to understand. I don't disagree with what you said. If you go to page 3, it says the information you're providing us, you're telling us that the St. Charles County, Missouri captains make $99,572. You're saying that that's the average, right? Or is it 106? Which one is it?
No, these are ranges, not actual salaries.
Okay, Joanne, the ranges are, that's a false narrative. If you look at what they're making, the average captain makes, the average pay is $94,375. You're saying the range is 106 to 99, they're not even in there. And so then you're saying that they're 94%, that number is false. Because if they're not even, there's not one captain making $99,000. You're saying the range is 106 to 99,000? There's not one captain in that range.
That doesn't say it's 106 to 99,000.
What does it say then? It says the average, that's how I read it.
The range for captain starts at 77,457.
On this sheet here that you provided to us,
That's okay, you're just, so I have Sam, come
Yeah,
along
Sam.
with something different than you did.
Yeah, so what you're seeing at 106, 291,
Yeah.
that's the average of the municipalities on the other page.
okay, then the
That's
St.
their
Charles
average
County,
median.
Missouri average is 99,000.
That's not our average, that's the midpoint of our range.
That's the
But,
midpoint.
okay, there's my point. Not one, you're saying that's the midpoint of the range, but not one captain is making $99,000. So why are you providing us this information? This is a false narrative. I see, when I look at this, I'm thinking, oh, well, our guys are making an average of 99,000. That's not true. The average is 94,000. They're not even close to the top of the range.
So this is how we do our salary analysis. We look at the midpoints and we analyze the midpoints. Our midpoint is 99,000, which is 94% of that 106.
Okay.
But in reality, you're not.
They're not making that. They're not even close. Look at the numbers. They're at 87 to 95. You don't have one captain making 99,000. So that's what I'm saying. You're giving us these numbers and they're not accurate.
You're looking at each individual person. That's not what we're looking at when we do the analysis. We're looking at
These
the
are the real
range.
numbers, though.
Her numbers are accurate, what goes back to that point.
I can't understand you guys with them things
Would you
on.
step through? It goes back to that conversation we had last week about two separate things. We're talking here about the average of the midpoints of the range. And yes, our captains are not currently making the midpoint of the range. So what we're saying to you is the issue that needs to get resolved is they need to be moving further through that range more quickly.
Okay, then move them
If
through the
you-
range. But see, you guys are giving us false numbers by
No,
all these numbers.
The numbers are accurate. If we move.
The range is irrelevant, Jennifer. Not even one of them is in the middle, high end of the range.
It's very relevant, because if we actually did what you were suggesting, which is to reclass them up a grade, they'd actually be further behind in that new range than they're presently through the range now. So you
Well,
look
then
at that
move them
new
up to the
mid,
top of the range. You can call it whatever you want to call it, but they're way underpaid. And you guys are using these numbers and they're not even accurate. It's a false. So let's go to the assistant directors. Where are you guys in the range? And so you guys are all getting these big raises. Where do you fall in the range? Are you guys at the high end of your range now?
I don't have it, I can pull my
Of course you
computer
don't.
up
I
and.
mean, no, because
Excuse
I
me,
wanna-
Councilman, I'll have Sam address if you've got other questions about other pay grades and ranges. I was answering your question as it relates to captains.
But it's on the
Thank
sheet
you.
it's on this sheet that we have. It says what you guys are making. What is the pay range? 307, what's the top pay range?
I can run across my office and bring the entire range book over. That's
Because, I
why-
mean, if you're using numbers, if you're not
We kept
consistent.
calling and saying,
Brett's
what do
got it
you
right
all want to talk about? We got no information whatsoever about what you wanted to know tonight.
Well, this is the sheet that.
So the
Sandra-
range for the, what do you guys know? What are they, 306s?
Well, what I'm trying to ask you is, are you guys being
So the range right now is
consistent?
103 to 161. The new range would be 118 to 186. They would both be making under the midpoint. So they wouldn't even be halfway through.
What is the range at 307 again?
118, 560 to 186, 258.
Well, then why wouldn't you just move them up in the middle of the range rather than give them another classification? That's the same thing, what we're talking about.
Because the range that they're in compared to other jobs in the region that include their job duties is off as a range.
Chairman,
Mr. Hammonds.
that's why it's so important that when comes around to raises, that we do merit increases and not a cost of living, because that keeps them moving up. After this year, there'll be two captains that will be over 100,000, and one will be just below that.
On the new sheet?
Yeah.
That's
That's-
counting
I have a
4%.
question for Samantha. Samantha, we can figure out I see what you've done. I think part of the problem that Mr. Braswell has, and I even interpreted it incorrectly as well, is we thought these were the actual averages, but these are actually averages for within that range, correct?
They're the averages of the municipalities on the other sheet, yes. They're midpoint
For the
averages.
ranges, okay? So, and here, same way, we're looking at this, we're looking at the center range, and it's not a reflection of the true average. I think that's what he's getting at.
Yeah, that's right, that's not an average, it's the actual midpoint for that range.
Right, and I don't think that was your intent to mislead or anything, I think the intent was, the problem is that this wasn't clearly identified how what this number represented. We can figure out what the average captain pay is, and the captain, lieutenant, and the sergeant from the sheet that Joanne did. We can just add these numbers up, divide by 17 for the sergeant, you can figure.
Yes.
Do you have a ability with that software that you have to find out what the average pay is for a sergeant in this area? Outside, not the ranges, but the average pay would be?
Not in that system, but we can always reach out to HR departments and get their information on their actual pay for each
Because
individual.
if you really want to know if you're underpay them or not, okay, you got to almost find out what you're paying versus theirs. When you're comparing ranges, it really is not a good way because you don't know where those particular employees are within the range or how many's within the range. But if you can actually find the actual pay of that person, that's probably the easiest way to do, because when you give reality is when a police officer goes shopping for another department to think about moving, he's looking at what he's making now, and he's looking at what can he make at that other place. And I think that's what I think we're all concerned about, is we like our police, if they do a good job, we want to make sure they're happy. So if there's a way, so the only thing the software will do is tell you the ranges, it won't tell you the actual pay.
Right, so the way the software is made, the way you do compensation analysis is you look at the pay range and you compare your pay range to the pay ranges around you. So it's not doing it by individual people. It doesn't designate where they are in the pay range. It doesn't look at anything like that. It's simply, we look at our pay range and then we compare it to the pay ranges around us.
Okay. Years back, before we had that software, there was a bigger problem with the police department. I know Craig McGuire had sat down, he had actually, I sat down and talked to Tom about it, and with Craig McGuire, and he actually called around and found out, like, sergeants with 5 years' experience, what they were getting paid at St. Peter's. I think we did St. Peter's, O'Fallon, St. Charles, and Wentzville. And we threw out Wentzville because it was on the low side, and St. Charles, because they were on the high side, looked at what was in the center. So, I mean, we actually looked at the actual pay that they were getting, not the ranges.
Yeah, and that's something that,
info.
that's something that we were talking about needs to be done, because they're not moving through the pay ranges, and that's what you're talking about, is how, why are they not moving through the pay ranges if they've been here for 5 years or what have you? Why aren't they where they're supposed to be in the pay range? And that is something that needs to be addressed, but that's not what gets addressed in a compensation study, but that is something we need to look at for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Abel? Okay. You looked at me. All right, anything else?
Well, the only thing I'd add is with our employees, and you guys should know this, that it costs so much money to train guys, or train anybody in our county, highway guys, all of them. But police is even all the white shirts, you send them to the FBI Academy, you send them to training, you send them to target practice. I mean, you just spend so much money on training these guys. And like any job, sales, whatever it may be, you're gonna go where the pay is. You're gonna go where the market brings you. And that's what happens with our employees. We can't spend all this money on training them and then losing guys to better paying jobs. I know that's reality sometimes, and sometimes you can't do anything about it, but when it's something so blatant as this, I don't know. And Joanne, the other thing is, I don't understand how some of these guys are been with the department so long and they're not even, they're at the midpoint. I mean, I don't understand how this sliding scale is supposed to work, because maybe the answer isn't putting them up pay grade. Maybe it's pushing them to the end of the scale. I don't know, but it just doesn't seem to be working right. And then, and I'm not necessarily blaming anybody. I'm just saying it just doesn't make any sense. When you see something, we don't need to spend $200,000 for an evaluation when we can see it, when it's right here on paper, that the lieutenants are going to make more than the captains. I mean, that to me is obvious. So those are some, and you can say, well, we could do this with everyone. Well, this is the information I have right now. I don't have information on anything else, and I see that it's wrong. And so therefore I can do something about it, at least try to do something about it. And that's where I'm on this. Maybe there's a lot of problems and discrepancies. I don't know, but this is with the information I have in front of me.
Mr. Hammond, go ahead.
Well, Joe, I think it's across the board. We got a lot of problems, because there's people with 25 years that aren't even close to the top of the scale. And I think they ought to be at the top
I
after
agree.
25 years.
I agree.
That's why it's so important that we give merit increases so they can move up the scale.
I
And they
agree.
haven't been doing that.
You
every
hire someone and that's their expectations.
year.
I mean,
But, you know, if you've got captains that were, you know, the few captains that I know are awfully dedicated employees, and they've been here for some of them instances 30 years, and they're not even close to the mid-range right now. Some of them are below the mid-range. You got a problem. I mean, if I was a captain, I had 30 years in and did all the training I was supposed to do and did my job the way I was at, and I was still below the midpoint of the ranges, I think, what the hell do I have to do to get my wages up comparable to the other captains? And I don't think there's much turnover in captains. Correct me if I'm wrong, have you had any turnover in captains? I'd be curious what the turnover rate is in sergeants, because when we tackled the highway department, it was because we had a 70% turnover in 2 years that the superintendents alerted to us. I don't know if you have that problem or not with sergeants in the department or not. Those captains have been here their whole career. I would say those guys are probably gonna stay. I think it's a matter of an ethical question whether we need to pay them what they need to be paid. But the sergeants are probably at the rank where they can move on. And if you've got a turnover problem with the sergeants, maybe it's time to address it now.
Joe, we got the same problem with a lot of employees that've been here 30 years that aren't even close to the top.
All right, anyone else? All right, we will put that issue to rest, at least for now. Obviously, you know, that will come up when we vote on the budget, which will be at our next council meeting. Is there anything else in the budget that anyone has any issues with or wants discussed? Okay, seeing none, how about, let's say we've got a couple minutes. Anything else?
Anything the administration wants to tell
Yes.
us about the balance of the budget? That we need to know about?
About the
Is there
balance?
anything else that we probably ought to discuss that's in the budget that we haven't discussed? Okay. Okay? I'm just asking.
No, I mean, I think that probably the big conversation that we had was Christine's about where we need to go with the buildings and the cost of upkeep and maintenance on the buildings. So obviously, that's something we'll have to keep a careful eye on each year, that we keep chipping away at taking care of the roofs and the structures and the upgrades that need to be made to the buildings. So,
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
The only comment I would make about this is I understand where Mr. Brazel's coming from on paying our captains better, but I think Mr. Hammond's correct, and we have a lot of employees who need to move through the range. When I talked with some folks in the administration this past week, we talked about that's an issue that everyone recognizes. The problem that no one wants to talk about, and I know we're not going to talk about it again this year, is this all comes back to funding. We've got to figure out alternative funding sources. We've got to figure out how to get more money. We found out about all this upkeep that's got to be done in the building. We've got a $93 million project with the jail that I think we all agreed needs to be the way that we're going to move forward, but yet we don't have a funding source for paying for that plan that we all agreed on. So until we're ready to bite the bullet and figure out some sort of alternative funding, the only way that we're going to be able to pay our employees what they really should be getting paid is we're going to have to figure out things that you're willing to cut out of the budget and things that you're willing to do. So that means to give some sort of relief, we're going to have to inflict some sort of pain into the budget. And until then, we're continuing to see a pie that continues to shrink, and we need to pay more. Otherwise, the fact of the matter is we're just going to see that turnover, and we're going to continue to be a training ground for certain positions. And that's just the way it's going to work, because until we have the funding that comes in, you can talk about it all day long, and it's not a matter of whether or not they deserve the money. It's a matter of fact of, do we have the money? And that's kind of where we're going to have to end up being. And I know that's not a 10-minute discussion that we can have right now. That's a longer conversation that's going to have to happen.
We could bring a little of it up, okay? Senator Schatz just putting out to legislation to raise the fuel tax, okay?
Okay.
Good, okay? That would be a big help to the county, okay? The other thing is just realize this, use tax revenues are gonna keep doing this.
Yep.
Sales tax revenues are gonna do this, okay? We're gonna have a glutton at use tax fund that we collect from parks. And sooner or later, we're gonna have to go back to the public and say, look, when we set the use tax in place, we didn't realize it was gonna escalate and be as big a fund as it is. Can we use some of that money for public safety? We can go to the voters, I think if we explain it correctly in the right terms, and we don't defund the parks with it, we actually take the surplus money and use that for general revenue, for public safety, I think the public would go along with it. And that could generate a lot of extra money, okay? I've said this before, but it kind of bounces off the wall, so I'll say it one more time.
Mr. County Executive.
Related to that, I'm trying to find the exact date, but we've got the legislators coming in next week to talk to them about
On the 18th.
the 18th, about Wayfair. So hopefully we'll find a little bit more about where they think that issue is. I talked to Senator Eigel about it a little bit last week, and they're thinking about it, but.
All right.
And we definitely will be talking to them about the
Fuel tax.
fuel user fee.
Yeah.
Yes.
It also, in the business section, Missouri has the lowest fuel in the entire nation now, lowest priced fuel.
All right. We will take a brief 8-minute recess, and then we will get back and start the regular meeting.